The rain had been falling since early morning, turning the narrow streets into streams of muddy water. Inside a small, cracked house at the edge of town, a young woman sat quietly on the floor, her knees pulled close to her chest. She listened to the sound of angry voices coming from the other room. She already knew what they were talking about. They had been talking about it for weeks, but today, the voices sounded different. Today, they sounded final. Her father's business had failed long ago. What started as a small loan to keep food on the table slowly grew into a mountain of debt. Interest piled on interest. Promises were made and broken. Each visit from the lenders became louder, crueler, and more threatening. They no longer wanted excuses. They wanted payment. She had tried to help in every way she could. She worked wherever she was, allowed cleaning houses, washing dishes, stitching clothes late into the night. Still, it was never enough. Every time she handed over her small earnings, the amount owed seemed to grow instead of shrink. Hope slipped away quietly like water through broken fingers. That morning, the lender sat across from her father at the old wooden table. Their eyes were cold, their words sharp. They spoke of deadlines and consequences. Then one of them glanced toward the door where she stood frozen, unseen. A slow smile spread across his face. That smile made her stomach tighten. "There is another way," he said calmly, as if discussing the weather. Her father's hands shook as he asked what that way was. The answer came easily, without shame. They spoke about her as if she were not a person, but an object. Someone who could be sent away. Someone whose value could erase numbers written on paper. Her ears rang. She wanted to scream, to run, to deny it all. But when she looked at her father, she saw a man already broken by guilt and fear. His shoulders were bent, his eyes empty. He did not speak at first. Silence filled the room, heavy and painful. That silence became her answer. She walked back to her small room and closed the door. Her hands trembled as she packed the few clothes she owned into an old bag. Each folded shirt felt like a goodbye. She did not cry at first. The tears came later. When the house grew quiet and the rain softened outside, she thought about her childhood, about days when laughter filled the same rooms now filled with fear. She wondered how life had turned into something so cruel without asking her permission. She was not angry anymore. She was tired. By evening, a car arrived outside the house. It was black, clean, and looked out of place in that broken street. One of the lenders stepped out and knocked on the door. Her father could barely meet her eyes as she walked past him. He whispered an apology she had already heard. Too many times. She stepped into the car without looking back. The ride felt endless. She watched the city change through the window from narrow streets to wider roads, from small homes to tall buildings shining with lights. It felt like she was leaving one life behind and entering another she did not understand. No one spoke to her during the drive. She sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap, her heart beating fast. She did not know where she was going. She only knew she no longer belonged to herself. When the car finally stopped, she looked up at a large gate opening slowly. Beyond it stood a massive house, surrounded by gardens and bright lights. It looked like something from another world. Fear wrapped around her chest. She wondered what kind of place this was, and what kind of people lived there. She was led inside and told to wait. The floors were polished, the air smelled clean, and everything felt too perfect. She felt small, out of place, and painfully aware of her worn shoes and simple clothes. After some time, a man entered the room. He was tall, well-dressed, and calm in a way that made others nervous. His eyes moved to her face, then quickly away. He was used to people fearing him, but something about her quiet presence made him pause. He asked why she was there. The answer he received did not please him. As the truth slowly unfolded, something shifted in the room. What had been treated as a simple transaction suddenly felt wrong. Very wrong. The man's expression hardened, not with anger toward her, but toward those who had brought her there. She stood silently, unsure whether to speak or stay invisible. Years of hardship had taught her that silence was safer. That night, she was shown to a small room within the large house. It was clean, warm, and far kinder than she expected. Still, sleep did not come easily. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering what tomorrow would bring. For the first time since leaving home, a strange thought crossed her mind. What if her life was not over yet? What if this place, meant to be another prison, was something else entirely? She did not know it yet, but the moment she stepped into that house, her story began to change. Not because of money or power, but because someone had finally seen her not as a price to be paid, but as a human being. The next morning, the young woman woke to the sound of birds outside her window, a gentle contrast to the chaos she had left behind. The room felt unfamiliar yet safe, with soft sunlight filtering through clean curtains. For the first time in weeks, she felt the small warmth of hope, but it was mixed with fear. She did not know what awaited her. She did not know if she could trust anyone in this house. Breakfast was brought to her in a small tray. She hesitated, not used to being treated with care. Every bite felt strange, almost luxurious. The bread was soft, the eggs perfectly cooked, and the fruit fresh and sweet. She remembered the meals at home: thin soup, stale bread, and constant worry. She wondered if this sudden change would last, or if it was just another trap. She could not see. The man who owned the house appeared again later that morning. He watched her quietly from a distance at first, then finally spoke. His voice was calm, steady, but it carried a weight that made her pay attention. "Why are you here?" he asked. She swallowed, unsure what to say. She wanted to tell him everything, but the words felt heavy and dangerous. Instead, she said only what was necessary, careful not to add emotions that might make her vulnerable as she spoke. She noticed him listening closely, really listening. That small difference made her heart pound. He did not interrupt or judge. He did not look at her as someone to control or own. He looked at her as someone who had suffered and deserved to be heard. Over the next few days, the young woman explored the house under the guidance of a quiet, kind staff member. The house was immense, full of rooms she could never imagine. Each corner seemed to hold another story, another secret. Yet despite the grandeur, she felt isolated. She was a stranger in a world she had never been part of. Her shoes, her clothes, her simple manners all reminded her that she did not belong at first. She kept to herself, walking quietly through hallways, observing people who moved around her with practiced grace. Some smiled politely, others barely noticed her. She felt like a shadow. Yet the man watched her more than anyone else, noticing details she did not realize she revealed. A hesitant step, a dropped handkerchief, a nervous glance, he saw them all. One afternoon, he asked her to join him in the garden. She hesitated but obeyed, stepping into sunlight and flowers she had never touched. He was standing by a fountain, looking at the water ripple softly. She felt her voice stick in her throat, unsure what to say. "You have been through much," he said quietly, almost to himself. "You should not have had to bear it alone." She wanted to speak, but no words came. He did not press her, and she realized for the first time that no one had ever spoken to her like this before. Not with concern, not with understanding, not with patience. Fear and confusion still lingered, but the seed of trust was planted. The days passed slowly. She was given small tasks, nothing overwhelming, nothing that would remind her of servitude or fear. Cleaning a room, arranging flowers, running simple errands. Every task was done with guidance and kindness. Slowly, she began to feel capable, useful in a way she had not felt in years. She began to believe, just a little, that maybe she could exist in this world without being afraid all the time. Meanwhile, the man continued his observation. He did not interfere directly, but left small gestures of support: a warm drink when she seemed tired, a word of encouragement when she completed a task. Sometimes, their eyes would meet and he would nod slightly, acknowledging her presence without making her feel small. She did not know why he did this. She did not understand why someone with his wealth and power would pay attention to her at all. One evening, she heard a conversation through the hall. Two staff members whispered about her, wondering how long she would stay, what her story was, and whether she would ever fit in. For a moment, she felt the sting of humiliation, the reminder that she was an outsider. She wanted to shrink away, to hide, to pretend she was invisible. But then, she remembered the small kindnesses of the man, and a quiet resolve began to grow. She would not let them see her fear. She would survive. Time moved differently in the house. Days became weeks. The young woman began to notice small changes in herself. She walked taller, spoke more freely, smiled more often, and even laughed once or twice, something she had not done in a long time. Each day, she felt the walls of her old life, the fear, the shame, the exhaustion, breaking slowly, leaving space for something new. The man noticed the changes too. He saw the way she reacted to the world around her, cautious but curious, wary but brave. Something about her strength and vulnerability together intrigued him. He found himself wondering about her past, imagining the hardships she had endured, and feeling a desire to protect her that went beyond simple responsibility. One afternoon, he invited her to join him for tea in the study. The room smelled of old books and polished wood. She sat nervously, unsure what to expect. He spoke about simple things. First the weather, the gardens, the taste of the tea, nothing important, nothing overwhelming. Then he asked about her life, gently, carefully. Without pressing for answers, she might not want to give as she spoke. She realized she was telling someone her story, really telling someone for the first time in years. Her words were shaky at first, but as he listened without judgment, they grew steadier. She told him about the debts, the fear, the long nights of work. She told him about her dreams, small and fragile, but still alive. He listened, nodding occasionally, not interrupting, not dismissing. He acknowledged her pain, her courage, her existence. By the end of the conversation, she felt lighter, as if some weight had been lifted. For the first time in her life, she felt that someone truly saw her. She felt a strange mixture of gratitude and confusion. She did not understand why he cared, but she knew that his attention felt different from the fear she had known all her life. Days turned into weeks, and the bond between them grew quietly. It was not love, not yet, but a connection based on understanding, on recognition of shared humanity. The young woman began to feel safe, and in that safety, she began to imagine a life that was not dictated by fear or debt. One evening, as she walked through the garden alone, the man joined her. He did not speak at first. They walked side by side, listening to the sound of the fountain and the wind in the trees. Then he spoke softly, almost a whisper. "You have a strength that not many possess. I hope you realize it." She looked at him, unsure how to respond. Words felt inadequate. All she could do was nod and continue walking, feeling the strange new warmth of recognition. For the first time, she believed that her past did not have to define her future in that house. Surrounded by wealth she had never known, and kindness she had never expected, the young woman began to feel the first stirrings of hope. She still carried the scars of her past, but she was learning that they did not have to control her. Slowly, carefully, she started to see that her life could change not by force, not by luck, but by the simple, human acts of understanding, respect, and care that she had been missing for so long. And though she did not yet know it, the world outside the walls of that grand house would soon challenge them both, testing the fragile bond they were forming. But for now, in the quiet moments of shared presence and small gestures of kindness, a new chapter of her life had begun. One that might someday lead to a happiness she had never dared to imagine. Weeks had passed since she first arrived at the grand estate, and the young woman was slowly finding her rhythm. She had begun to adjust to the routines of the house, learning the names of the staff, the schedule of meals, and even the quiet rhythm of the man's presence. Each day brought a small sense of stability she had never known. And with that stability came a growing feeling of security. Despite the comfort, a part of her remained uneasy. She knew that her presence in the house was not entirely by choice. It was a rescue, yes, but also a reminder of the danger she had escaped. Every now and then, memories of the dark streets, angry voices, and her father's despair would resurface, making her heart race and her hands tremble. The man seemed to notice these moments. He did not ask questions, but his watchful eyes conveyed a quiet understanding. Sometimes he would leave a warm cup of tea at her room door or a small note encouraging her to rest. Small gestures, almost invisible. Yet they made her feel seen and cared for in a way she had never experienced. One afternoon, the man summoned her to his study. The room was lined with books and soft light, the air filled with the faint scent of polished wood. He gestured to a chair and asked her to sit. She hesitated, sensing that something serious would follow. "You have been here for some time now," he began, his voice calm but deliberate. "I think it is time I know more about you. Not just the story I was told, but your story. The real one." Her throat tightened. She had spent years hiding her life, guarding herself against anyone who might use her pain. But the earnestness in his eyes made her pause. She slowly began to speak, hesitantly at first, recounting her childhood, the struggles, the relentless fear of losing everything. Her words were halting, sometimes breaking into silence as memories overwhelmed her. Yet he listened, never interrupting, never judging. His patience allowed her to unfold layer by layer, revealing the truth she had buried deep. As she spoke, she noticed something in him change. His eyes darkened with concern, and his jaw tightened in quiet anger. He asked no questions about the debt or the transaction that brought her here. Instead, his focus was on her well-being, her courage, and the hardships she had endured. For the first time, she felt the full weight of another person truly caring about her, not as a responsibility or obligation, but as a human being deserving of respect and compassion. After that day, the dynamic between them shifted. He became more present, checking in on her with small, thoughtful gestures. He offered guidance when she needed it and quietly ensured that she was treated with dignity by the staff. He never demanded anything from her, never asked for gratitude or obedience beyond what was reasonable. Slowly a bond grew, built not on fear or debt, but on mutual recognition and understanding. The young woman began to realize her own strength. She had survived circumstances that would have broken most people. And now, for the first time, she had space to breathe, to learn, to grow. She started taking small initiatives, organizing rooms, tending to the gardens, even offering ideas on improving tasks around the house. Each act, however minor, gave her a sense of purpose and ownership over her own life. One evening, while walking through the garden, she noticed a group of workers approaching the estate. She had heard the occasional whispers about threats from the past. It's about the dangerous individuals who had demanded her family's debt. Fear gripped her chest. Memories of being powerless flooded back. The man noticed her sudden tension and stepped close, his presence both calming and commanding. "You are safe here," he said quietly, his voice firm yet soothing. "No one will harm you. I will make sure of that." His words carried weight, but it was not just the promise that reassured her. It was the certainty in his eyes, the unspoken guarantee that he would act to protect her. In that moment, she understood that this man was not merely a benefactor. He was someone who had chosen to stand by her, to ensure her safety, and perhaps, without fully realizing it, to care for her deeply. Over time, their conversations deepened. They spoke not just of her past, but of dreams, fears, and small joys. He asked her about books she might like, music she enjoyed, and places she wished to visit. She found herself sharing thoughts she had never voiced aloud, dreams she had thought too fragile to survive. He listened, offered gentle guidance, and occasionally challenged her gently to think bigger, to imagine a life beyond survival. One afternoon, she stumbled upon an old photo album in a quiet corner of the house. The images showed the man at different stages of his life, some joyful, some solemn. She realized that he, too, had a history, experiences that shaped the person he was. For the first time, she saw him not just as a figure of power, but as someone human, someone with vulnerabilities and emotions hidden beneath a calm exterior. Their relationship continued to evolve, quiet yet profound. She began to notice subtle gestures, a hand resting briefly on her shoulder in reassurance, a small smile when she succeeded in a task, a soft word of encouragement when she faltered. Each act, small though it was, communicated care and recognition. Slowly, the walls she had built around herself began to crumble. One evening, during a particularly quiet moment in the garden, the man spoke again, his voice low and reflective. "You have endured more than anyone should, but you are not defined by it. You have strength, resilience, and a heart that still finds hope. That is rare. She felt tears rise in her eyes, a mix of relief, gratitude, and the lingering sorrow of years lost to fear and struggle. For the first time, she felt that her past did not have to dictate her future. She could exist in this space, with this man, without fear, without shame. She could begin to rebuild herself piece by piece. At her own pace, days turned into weeks, and the young woman began to see her own transformation. Confidence replaced hesitation, and quiet strength replaced fear. She no longer felt like a shadow in a world of grandeur. She felt present, capable, and seen. The bond between her and the man grew quietly, rooted in respect, understanding, and the shared acknowledgement of each other's humanity. Yet, beneath the calm, both were aware that the world outside the walls of the estate would not remain still. Challenges from the past, societal expectations, and the scrutiny of those who could not understand their bond loomed ahead. But for now, in the sanctuary of the house, they had found a fragile peace, a space to heal, grow, and begin to explore feelings that neither had anticipated. The young woman knew that her life had changed irrevocably the moment she arrived at the estate, not because of wealth, power, or rescue alone, but because she had been treated as a person worthy of care, respect, and understanding. She had found a place where she could be herself without fear, where her voice could be heard, and where her presence mattered. And as the sun set over the gardens that evening, casting golden light over both of them, she realized that this was only the beginning of a story that could one day lead to hope, love, and freedom she had never dared to dream of. Life at the estate had become a rhythm the young woman had begun to understand. She had settled into her routines, and the man's presence had become less intimidating and more reassuring. Yet she knew that the world beyond these walls did not pause for anyone. Her past, her family's debt, and the people who had sought to control her life still lingered. Hidden, but not gone. One morning, as she walked through the gardens collecting flowers, she noticed a group of unfamiliar people at the entrance of the estate. Their faces were serious, eyes sharp, and they carried a sense of purpose that immediately set her on edge. Something in her chest tightened. Memories of fear and danger from her past rushed back. She froze, unsure whether to retreat or face them. The man appeared beside her, his presence calm but commanding. "Stay here," he instructed, his eyes scanning the newcomers. They did not move forward immediately. Instead, they spoke quietly among themselves before one stepped forward and introduced himself. He claimed to represent someone from her past, someone who had been owed payment long ago. She felt her stomach drop. The past she had hoped to leave behind had come seeking her. The man did not flinch. He listened carefully, his expression unreadable, and then he turned to her. "You do not have to face this alone," he said softly. She nodded, relief washing over her, but fear remained a constant companion. Together, they addressed the matter. He spoke with authority and clarity, making it unmistakably clear that no harm would come to her under his watch. The visitors hesitated, intimidated by his presence, and eventually retreated. That night she lay in her room, the events of the day playing over in her mind. For the first time, she truly understood the depth of his protection. He was not merely a benefactor offering comfort and kindness. He was a guardian, willing to confront the shadows of her past to ensure her safety. A complex mixture of gratitude, respect, and something unfamiliar began to grow in her heart. Over the following weeks, the young woman noticed subtle shifts in her own behavior. She walked taller, her steps more certain, her voice firmer when she spoke. Her confidence was growing, not because she had forgotten the hardships, but because she now understood that she could endure and even overcome them with support. The man watched these changes quietly, often smiling when she succeeded in tasks that once seemed daunting. Acknowledging her progress with gentle approval, their conversations deepened. Moving from casual exchanges about the house and gardens to discussions about life, values, and hopes for the future. He asked about her dreams, small ones at first, and encouraged her to think bigger. She began to share her aspirations, not just about survival, but about education, independence, and the possibility of a life that was fully her own. He listened, guided, and occasionally challenged her to see possibilities beyond the limits she had imposed on herself. One afternoon, as the sun cast long shadows across the estate's terrace, she found herself speaking more openly than ever. She spoke of the fear that had accompanied her every step, the nights spent worrying for her family, and the constant sense of being trapped. Tears fell freely, not from weakness, but from the relief of finally being heard. He did not interrupt or offer empty reassurances. He simply listened, his presence steady and unwavering. For the first time, she felt that her story mattered, that her experiences, her pain, and her resilience were seen and respected. She realized that this was different from anything she had known before. She did not need to hide, lie, or minimize herself to survive. She could exist in her full humanity, and someone would honor that existence. The man, too, began to show subtle signs of his evolving feelings. Small gestures, placing a hand lightly on her shoulder in reassurance, offering a protective glance when she walked through the estate. Leaving thoughtful notes conveyed a depth of care that went beyond duty. She sensed it, though she could not name it, and it stirred a mixture of curiosity, confusion, and a fragile hope within her. Despite the growing bond, challenges from the outside world soon tested them. Rumors began to circulate among staff and visitors alike, questioning the nature of their relationship. Whispers suggested motives and intentions, casting doubt on her sincerity and their connection. The young woman felt the sting of these judgments sharply. She had escaped fear and exploitation, only to face scrutiny and suspicion in a place she had hoped would be sanctuary. The man, however, remained steadfast. When confronted with the gossip, he did not lash out or dismiss her. Instead, he addressed the situation with calm authority, making it clear that he would not tolerate disrespect or harm directed at her. His unwavering support provided a buffer against the outside noise, reinforcing her sense of security and belonging. Even with these protections, moments of vulnerability arose. She occasionally struggled with lingering feelings of inadequacy, fear, and self-doubt. There were times when she wondered whether she truly belonged, whether her presence was genuine or simply a result of circumstance. During these moments, the man's quiet encouragement, his acknowledgement of her achievements, and his patience became lifelines. He never rushed her, never demanded gratitude, and never allowed her to feel like she owed him her identity. Gradually, she began to engage more fully with the life around her. She explored the estate, learned new skills, and even began to participate in decisions about her own daily routine. Each small act of independence strengthened her confidence, reinforcing the understanding that she was no longer defined solely by her past or her circumstances. She was learning to exist on her own terms, within a world that now allowed her space to grow. One evening, as twilight settled over the gardens, the young woman and the man shared a quiet moment by the fountain. The water reflected the soft colors of the sky, and for a brief instant the world felt suspended. He spoke gently, acknowledging her progress, her courage, and her resilience. She realized that he saw her not just as someone to protect, but as someone to respect, admire, and perhaps even care for deeply. She looked at him, a mixture of gratitude, curiosity, and something tender in her eyes. Words were unnecessary. The moment itself spoke volumes. It was a shared understanding, a recognition that both of them were navigating uncharted territory, emotions that had emerged unexpectedly, feelings that challenged their previous assumptions, and a connection that neither had anticipated. As days turned into weeks, the young woman continued to grow, her confidence solidifying, her fears gradually receding. She still carried the scars of her past, but they no longer dictated her every action. She had found a sanctuary where she could heal, explore, and begin to envision a life that was not constrained by fear or debt. The man remained a steady presence, guiding without controlling, caring without demanding. Their relationship evolved quietly, rooted in trust, respect, and the subtle acknowledgement of mutual humanity. While the outside world posed challenges and whispers of judgment persisted, they faced them together, their bond providing a buffer against uncertainty. In the quiet of the estate, amidst gardens, books, and sunlight filtering through windows, The young woman discovered the possibility of a future she had never dared to imagine. She was learning that freedom was not just the absence of fear, but the presence of understanding, support, and the ability to shape her own life. And in that understanding, a fragile, beautiful connection was beginning to grow, a connection that would carry them both through the trials that were still to come. The days following the confrontation with her past were quiet but full of meaning. The young woman had begun to understand that her life had shifted in ways she had never imagined. She was no longer defined by fear, debt, or the people who had once sought to control her. Instead, she was learning to exist fully in the present, to embrace small victories, and to feel the warmth of safety, care, and respect. One morning, as sunlight spilled across the estate's gardens, she walked beside the man through the flower beds. The air was fresh, carrying the scent of blossoms and the promise of new beginnings. He spoke of practical matters at first, discussing plans for the house and the gardens. But gradually the conversation shifted. He asked her about her hopes for the future, and she found herself speaking more freely than ever before. She spoke of education she had once dreamed of work that would give her independence, and of a life where she could make choices without fear. He listened, offering advice and encouragement, guiding her gently, without imposing his will. It was a partnership of minds and hearts, a relationship built on mutual respect rather than obligation. As the weeks passed, their bond grew stronger. They spent time together in simple, quiet ways, walking in the gardens, sharing meals, discussing books, or sitting in silence by the fountain. Each moment was a small affirmation of trust, a recognition that both had chosen to be present in each other's lives. She began to feel that she could express herself fully without fear of judgment, and he, in turn, allowed himself to feel something he had long kept buried. Challenges continued to arise, however. The world outside the estate did not pause for their connection. Some staff members whispered doubts, questioning her presence and intentions. While distant family members and acquaintances from her past occasionally appeared, testing the boundaries she now enjoyed. Each time, the man stood by her side, defending her and ensuring her dignity was maintained. His unwavering support reinforced the young woman's growing confidence and strengthened the trust between them. One afternoon, she found herself in the library, surrounded by books she had only glimpsed from afar before. She began reading more deeply, learning about subjects she had never imagined. Her mind, once preoccupied solely with survival, now explored ideas, dreams, and possibilities. She realized that knowledge could empower her, that education could be a key to independence. The man encouraged her studies, providing books and guidance while respecting her pace and choices. Their interactions gradually began to reveal subtle emotions that neither had fully acknowledged before. Small touches, a hand brushing against hers accidentally. A shared laugh, a comforting look conveyed feelings they were only beginning to recognize. There was no rush, no declaration, only the gentle unfolding of connection, trust, and understanding. The young woman also began to reconnect with her family. With the man's guidance, she arranged for her father's debts to be resolved legally and securely. She visited her home cautiously at first, witnessing the relief and gratitude in her family's eyes. She realized that she had the power to change not only her own life, but also the lives of those she loved. That realization brought pride, hope, and a deep sense of responsibility. The world outside could no longer dominate her life. She had reclaimed her agency, her voice, and her sense of self-worth. She walked with confidence, spoke with clarity, and smiled with genuine joy. Each day she discovered more about her own resilience, intelligence, and capacity for hope. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the estate, she and the man sat together by the fountain, watching the water ripple gently. He spoke quietly, acknowledging her journey, her strength, and the courage she had shown in overcoming so many obstacles. She looked at him, feeling gratitude and a warmth that went beyond simple friendship. She realized that she cared for him deeply, not because he had saved her, but because he had respected her, guided her, and shared in her journey as an equal. He, too, recognized the depth of his feelings. He had come to admire her resilience, her kindness, and her capacity for hope, despite a life filled with hardship. He had come to care not as a protector from a distance, but as someone who wanted to share a future with her, someone who had found unexpected love in the most unlikely circumstances. In the weeks that followed, they navigated the delicate dance of emotions, allowing their relationship to grow naturally. There was laughter, gentle teasing, quiet conversations, and shared moments of silence that spoke volumes. They learned to communicate without words, to trust without reservation, and to support one another without expectation. Eventually, the young woman realized that her journey from fear and exploitation to trust and love had reached a new stage. She no longer saw herself as a victim or a transaction. She saw herself as a person capable of making choices, building relationships, and shaping her destiny. She had reclaimed her life, and in doing so, she had found someone who valued her for who she truly was. The man, once distant and solitary, discovered that love could emerge not from wealth or power, but from shared respect, understanding, and the recognition of humanity in another person. Their connection had grown quietly, naturally, and with a depth that neither had anticipated in the final moments of each day. As they walked through the gardens or sat by the fountain, there was a sense of peace and belonging that neither had known before. They had faced fear, judgment, and uncertainty together, and in doing so, they had built a foundation of trust, respect, and love. The young woman's life had changed irrevocably, not through escape alone, but through the gentle, human acts of care, attention, and shared understanding. She had survived, she had grown, and she had found love not the kind that came from obligation or rescue, but the kind that blossomed from choice, respect, and recognition of each other's humanity. As the sun set over the estate, casting golden light across the gardens, she realized that her story was no longer one of fear or debt. It was a story of resilience, hope, and the transformative power of love and kindness. And in the quiet presence of the man who had come into her life unexpectedly, she knew that she had found not only safety and freedom, but a partnership built on equality, trust, and the promise of a shared future. Even after the young woman had found her footing in the estate and built a bond of trust and affection with the man, life was far from simple. The past she had endured left traces that were difficult to erase, and the outside world remained unpredictable. Despite her progress, she occasionally felt the weight of fear creeping back, reminding her that the road to full freedom and confidence was ongoing. One morning, she received a letter from a distant relative, someone who had known of her family's hardships but had been silent all these years. The letter expressed concern, a mixture of apologies and questions, but also contained subtle threats about unresolved matters from the past. Her chest tightened as she read it, the old familiar fear flickering inside her. She knew the man would notice her reaction without her speaking a word. He entered the room, his calm presence grounding her. "You don't have to face this alone," he said. She nodded, grateful for the reassurance. Together, they discussed the letter, reviewing the concerns, and planning how to respond. He guided her, ensuring that she was involved in every decision, rather than acting on her behalf without consent. This approach was unfamiliar, yet empowering. She realized that he was teaching her how to navigate the complexities of life while still protecting her dignity. Days later, a group of visitors arrived at the estate. They were business associates and acquaintances from his world, unfamiliar to her, yet observing with keen interest. She felt her nerves flare, the old anxiety returning. But the man stayed close, introducing her confidently to each person and allowing her to speak for herself. His presence did not overshadow her. Instead, it provided a safe space for her voice to be heard. She realized that her confidence had grown, not because fear was absent, but because she now had someone beside her who respected and supported her. She began to notice subtle changes within herself. She walked with poise, spoke with clarity, and handled challenges with a calm she had never known. The estate, once intimidating in its grandeur, now felt like a place where she could grow, explore, and make choices freely. She engaged with the household staff more actively, listening to their suggestions, offering ideas, and taking part in decisions about the estate's daily routines. Each action strengthened her sense of agency and reinforced her identity beyond the past she had escaped. Meanwhile, the man observed these changes with quiet pride. He saw the transformation not just in her actions, but in the way she carried herself, the subtle ease in her laughter, the sparkle in her eyes that had once been clouded with fear. He realized that what had begun as concern and responsibility had grown into deep admiration, respect, and an unexpected affection that he had never anticipated. The feelings were mutual, though unspoken, delicate and profound, building silently in the spaces they shared. One evening, the young woman ventured into the old library, a room filled with books, memories, and quiet solitude. She found herself drawn to the shelves, browsing titles on topics she had never explored before: our philosophy, science, and stories of resilience and survival. Each book offered her not just knowledge, but perspectives on life and hope that she had never considered. She felt a sense of wonder, a rekindling of curiosity that had lain dormant for so long. The man joined her quietly, noticing the interest in her eyes. He offered insights when asked, but mostly he allowed her to discover, to engage, and to form her own understanding. Their conversations became richer, layered with ideas, reflections, and shared insights. She began to see him not only as a protector, but also as a companion, someone who could challenge her mind, respect her thoughts, and value her opinions. Challenges arose unexpectedly. News from her past reached the estate through the form of an unexpected visitor claiming ties to old debts and obligations. Her heart raced, and she felt the familiar pangs of fear and vulnerability. But the man acted decisively. He addressed the situation calmly, firmly, ensuring that no harm came to her. She watched, awestruck, as he dismantled the threats with authority, protecting her not through fear, but through strategy, clarity, and unwavering support. She realized that he was teaching her, not just protecting her, showing her how to face challenges with courage and intellect. In the quiet moments that followed, they would sit together by the fountain in the garden. The sun would dip low, casting golden reflections on the water, and the air would carry the scent of flowers and fresh earth. They rarely spoke in these moments. Silence was comfortable, full of mutual understanding. She realized that love could exist in gestures, in presence, in shared experience rather than declarations or dramatic moments. It was gentle, steady, and profound. Her relationship with her family also began to stabilize. With the man's guidance, she was able to assist her father in managing his affairs and ensuring that past debts were fully resolved. She mediated carefully, maintaining her dignity while asserting her voice. And in doing so, she felt the power of independence. Her family, once a source of worry and fear, now became a pillar of support and pride. She navigated their challenges with newfound confidence. As weeks turned into months, the young woman noticed how her life had transformed. She had arrived at the estate a frightened, uncertain girl, sold into a situation that felt hopeless. Now she was an independent, confident young woman, capable of making decisions, expressing herself, and handling challenges. The past had not disappeared, but it no longer dictated her life. She had agency, strength, and a partner who valued her as an equal. The man, too, reflected on the transformation he had witnessed. His initial sense of responsibility had evolved into genuine admiration, respect, and love. He saw her not as someone who needed to be saved, but as someone who had endured, grown, and proven her strength in ways few could understand. The affection he felt was not born from power or pity, but from witnessing her resilience, intelligence, and heart. Together, they navigated the complexities of life outside their immediate sanctuary. She learned to manage social expectations, confront her past when necessary, and engage with the world with courage and integrity. He remained a steadfast companion, offering guidance, support, and care, but never controlling or diminishing her independence. Their partnership had become a balance of trust, respect, and mutual growth. One quiet evening, as the estate glowed in the soft light of the setting sun, she and the man walked together through the gardens. The conversation was light, filled with laughter and shared observations. Yet beneath the surface was a deep, unspoken understanding. They had faced fear, uncertainty, and the shadows of the past, and had emerged stronger, more connected, and deeply aware of each other's humanity. The young woman realized that her journey was a testament to resilience, courage, and the transformative power of empathy and care. She had been through unimaginable hardship, yet she had survived, grown, and discovered the potential for love and happiness that she had once believed impossible. Her life had been reshaped, not by luck alone, but by the choices she had made, the support she had received, and her willingness to trust, learn, and grow. In that moment, by the fountain with the sunlight reflecting on the water, she understood that her story was no longer defined by fear, debt, or helplessness. It was defined by strength, dignity, and love. She had been sold to pay a debt, but she had been saved by care, respect, and the unexpected emergence of love. And as she looked at the man beside her, she knew that they had both been transformed, not by circumstance alone, but by their willingness to see, understand, and value each other fully. Together, they were no longer bound by the past. They were building a future defined by freedom, choice, and the gentle, enduring power of love.